Okay, Keith Myers here. We're going to talk about another one of the major punches in the old school boxing, which of course is from the rear hand, the rear hand punch. Now I mentioned before, Jim Driscoll wrote an entire book called The Straight Left and How to Cultivate It, which was in Bruce Lee's library. It was a well-known book of the day, okay? And he focused on getting people back to using that lead hand and it not just being this flicky jab thing, okay? Because he was right in that kind of transitional area where things were becoming more modern and people were kind of fighting in closer and they were kind of like this. And more emphasis was being put on this kind of fighting, right? He was talking about going back to kind of the older method of making that lead hand a probing, powerful shot in your main thing, right? Rather than thinking of it just a jab to set up a power shot with the rear hand. But the rear hand, of course, is a factor. Now realize it's maybe less of a factor boxing at this range, because the difference between that old school boxing and more modern boxing, at least one of the differences, is range. In the more modern boxing, I mean, they may start from way out here and dance around and throw an extended shot every once in a while, but really it's designed to work from here, where you can use both arms, head motion, and sort of move around, right? That's modern boxing. This older era boxing was meant to be from a little further out, right? So I can keep my head out of the way. I'm here, and that's therefore those longer extended punches were what they were doing, because they were punching from back here rather than from here, right? And therefore that rear punch is not quite as easy to land because I'm not as close. I'm back here, so if I've landed my lead, I'm kind of stretched out a little bit. My rear punch is a longer punch. So it wasn't quite that flurry of pow, 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 right? Because it was more hit, and then land that one. And then maybe I'm coming back. Longer range. So let's talk about that rear hand punch. Obviously, it's from here. See, I'm kind of stretched out a little bit because the presumption is if I've landed this one, right, then if I'm going to land my rear, I've got to turn. My body drops out of the way just a little bit so it can come straight from my shoulder. So that's why that angle. Where this one, my upper body stays pretty much the same. For the rear hand shot, as this pulls back, I'm turning my body and it hits here. Where the lead lands with an almost vertical fist, because it's straight, that's kind of the symmetry. Because I'm turning, rolling my shoulder, this one is coming out and landing at more of an angle. Not rolled over necessarily, but it's still landing like this. Kind of like you saw with the lead low punch, just because of the angle as it drops, the hand turns. It's the same thing here. This is kind of dropping to some extent as my shoulder turns and I hit here. So notice I'm not doing a Wing Chun punch. Where this one is nice and straight and looks like a Wing Chun punch, the rear hand punch for the old school boxing was not this. I'm not doing that, right? It was hit, get my head out of the way, hit with this one, and roll it and shift my weight for a power shot. So lead, rear, lead, rear, lead, rear, right? Bam, bam, come back, hits, and rolls back. Right, so I show it from this side. Again, I'm here. That's where my lead would land. And then from there, I'm dropping out, lining up, hitting with this side. Then it rolls back. And that's how it gets loaded up and got its reputation as a power shot. Because it's coming from way back here, turning my hips and my shoulder. Boom! Big shot, right? So then that's also why if you watch some of that old school boxing footage, they're moving around and they're really moving their head as they're punching. Because that's what they're doing. They're evading and shifting into these punches from a distance. Which the modern equivalent would be doing this and hitting. Right? But they're way out here. Right? So practice that rear hand punch from here, like I'm guarding barring the mark, right? And then it's going to come out. This hand's coming back. It hits, and then as it comes down, it cycles right back into position again. Bam, and back. Bam, back. Bam, So that's the rear hand punch. We'll just roll right into one of the other major punches they use that you really don't see in modern boxing, again because of the distance. It's called the swinging punch, right? Swinging punch. There's other names for it. It was sometimes called a hooking punch, but we don't want to get confused with this one, so we'll stick with the swinging punch. And this punch was a punch that arced up and around, and it hits with this part of the knuckles, right there, right? And so the idea with this punch is I'm arcing it around, and it's going to hit, well, let me turn this way. Imagine that this is the guy's temple. He's standing in front of me. That's his left side of his head, right? If I'm in this guard. So this punch comes out like it's going to go straight, and then at the last minute it curves and it drops and it whips around and swings forward and it hits there. And then it comes back. I'm not hitting like this, so my wrist turns. You'll damage your arm, you'll wrench your elbow. It's coming around and it's almost like I'm going to do a hook punch, but it stops here. See what I mean? It's whipping like this. I'm not hitting with the flat and with my arm extended. It's hitting here, but it's not coming through like a hook. It's bam, bam. It's hitting like that. With my elbow still a little bent, my wrist nice and firm. I don't let my wrist collapse, and I'm hitting with those two knuckles. Not hitting with the back of my hand, still hitting with the front of my knuckles, but it's coming from an angle. That's the swinging punch. It came up, boom, boom, boom. So he thinks I'm going to go straight, boom, and then I hit from an angle. Boom. You see how I load my lead leg, and I'm actually lifting my lead heel, so my weight goes that way. Right? Swing. Let me back around this way. Rear hand, right? So now the guy's here, right side of his head. So I could have set this up. I'm doing lead punches, I'm going to do a low shot, and I see the opportunity. I move this foot, boom, right? It's coming around, hitting here and back. Right? Lead hand. So you get the idea. Is to catch the guy at a strange angle that's coming at him just past his peripheral vision and hitting here. Boom. 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 I could fake low and then lift that shot up. Bam. I fake low. So it catches him at a weird, unexpected angle, and you can tell that's a powerful blow. It's not just this swinging my arm up like that. I don't want my arm straight. I don't want my wrist relaxed. I don't want to hit with the back of my hand. It's here. Okay? So there you go. 2 major blows for this lesson.